Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parent, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including the Lead Dad of the Week. We have our community, both online and in person. We have a new resource library for all fathers called the Lead Dad Library. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Today is our holiday episode, and we're doing something a little different. We're talking about the Company of Dads itself, as in the people who make all of this possible. So today, in order of seniority, I'm going to list those people who are integral to what we do every single week. We have Helder Mira, who produces the podcast and sports a very fine Christmas sweater. Emily Servin, the web master. Terry Brennan, who oversees our audience strategy with the newsletter and handles member relations. And Skip Cherry Holmes, who runs our social media, but some of you may also recognize him from the Lead Dad Diaries. He also seems to be competing with Helder for best holiday sweater. I'm psyched to talk to them today, but I also want to give a shout out to our phenomenal advisory board, who I lean on a lot. In alphabetical order, we have Elisa Alvarez Calderon, Marvin Alviles, Ross Buckmuller, Najee Good, J.R. Havlin, Pete Hunsinger, Thorne Perkin, Carrie Schwab Pomerantz, Emily Porro, Eve Rodsky, and Jeff Stewart. Welcome, Helder, Emily, Terry, and Skip to the Company of Dads podcast. Happy holidays
to you.
Happy holidays to you too.
All right, good question here, easy question. What's the best thing that happened this past year to you as father, if you are a father, or with your father? Terry, why don't you take that one first?
You know, I would say that in my case, the best things that happened in the past year in terms of fatherhood, they're the same with my kids as with my father. I'm kind of in the generation right now where I sort of help my father out and also raise my twin daughters. And any moment where my daughters come to me, with their problems, and asking for my help is the best the best moment for me, because those are the times when we really connect, and when I really feel like I can help them. And it's the same thing with my father. My mother passed away about 2 years ago, and so he's sort of on his own, and I try to be a support to him as well. So whenever he comes to me with a problem where I can help him, that's the most rewarding time as a son as well.
Yeah. Emily, I'm going to go to you next. We've heard a lot about your dad over the past year in our weekly meetings. I understand he's a national treasure. This is also a big year for you, as something that perhaps your dad was involved in. So talk about your dad.
Yeah, so I got married and I moved, not in that order, this year, so it was a lot. Dad being the very supportive person he is, we're moving, right? I'm expecting all of my friends who are like also in their 20s to just like be here, be ready to lift some boxes. First person there is my dad. He's like, all right, put me to work. And he was there the longest out of everybody until it was time for everybody to just like kick back. So that was just fantastic. It was fun, and now my sister expects the same thing. Good luck, Dad.
I love. How did he become a national treasure, though? That's the question we have to answer.
Oh, he's just a great human being. He's just wonderful to talk to. He's a great conversationalist. He's always taken interest in even the stuff that won't get me a job. He's always been very cool about learning more of, like, I got the robot figures in the back here. He's always been very supportive of that stuff, and would even watch a bunch of the Japanese animation shows with me. So I always appreciate that. And because he's seen some, he gets my friends. And I had a friend tell me to tell him that he was thankful for my dad this year. So
That's wonderful.
everyone just loves Lawrence.
Elder, I've known you probably the longest by far on this call, and I have these recollections of you telling me wonderful stories about your dad. And did I remember this correct? Was his best friend a priest at some point, or just a good friend was a priest? Tell us about your dad.
So my dad immigrated here in the 70s from Portugal. So he's been here, the majority of his life, actually. So he's become as much of an American as he is a Portuguese resident. So he kind of like tends to live here. And he's also, proud, raised Catholic and is a devout Catholic. And we have our parish that he's very active in has a priest from Angola where my dad had spent some time as well. So the two of them over the past, time that the parish priest has been here had become pretty tight friends. So they would come over. He brings them over every so often to my house to we'll sit by the fire and have a scotch or so and talk different stories. And they usually have some crazy anecdotes that they tell back and forth. So yeah, that's been one of his ways to get back into life after losing my mom at the start of the pandemic. So,
and I know,
renowned and beloved on my block. He's as much a member of my street as he is his own neighborhood. So people here walk by thinking he actually lives here because he's usually outside doing some yard work or something, and dog whispering to all the local dogs.
That's wonderful. And every year you take a trip with him back to Portugal, right?
Or
at least the past couple years.
Well, the last 2 years we've gone back since we were able to start going back. So they have a house there that they built. Excuse me. They have a house that they built there. So my dad goes there, and several of his siblings are still there, as well as nieces and nephews and lots of family. So he goes there for a couple months, and I'll go either at the beginning or the end to just sort of hang out and catch up with the family. So yeah.
With his puttering around outside your house, it sounds like you need to connect him with Emily's dad. I mean, they could just kind of do all kinds of work together.
That would be great. You could always use an assist.
Skip. A lot of people know you from the Lead Dad Diaries, but you've got a son and a daughter, but you're also very close to your dad. You guys used to be really close. You used to always, you toured with him when you were a musician early on in your life. Tell us about, the best things that come to mind this past year about you as a dad and also maybe with your dad.
Yeah, definitely. Some amazing moments this year being, for those who have been following along, obviously the biggest changes of my life have occurred this year, and working from home and being home, being very, very prominent part of my children and their education, their upbringing, and just the precious moments too, has held so much joy for me. Just I think that whole, anytime something happens that I'm so glad I didn't miss out on, and I think about times in my touring life when I experienced something similar to this over a FaceTime call previously, which I'm so thankful for. I mean, FaceTime has only been a thing here in the last decade, but there's something about actually being able to be present and being a part of these moments and not having to experience them from 1,000 miles away. That has been so enriching for me. And like Terry said, especially when it comes to, hey, my kid has something that they're dealing with, and I'm the person that they want to go to help them. That's heavy for me, because it's like, you recognize that I hold or potentially hold a solution for you, or I'm just a comfort, somebody that you can go to for something. There've been so many moments like that in this past year that have been huge. But being able to spend time with my dad, especially here at the back half of the year, I talked about it, in this last, or in this the coming month of Lead Dad Diaries, but my dad came out for a visit, and I was with my dad and my son, when we got the call that his dad had passed away. And so, out of all the places that my dad could have been in the world, he was with me and I was with him, and all of that I felt like was a really strong, powerful moment with everything that he was going through. And the being that my son too is just such a bundle of joy and brings a smile to anybody's face who he runs into. It was a, you know, if you want to pinpoint a specific moment of seeing my son kind of cheering my dad up, and you know his grandson is just giving him that boost, as both the father and the son in the situation. It was a powerful moment for me, for sure.
Yeah. You know, people that listen to the podcast and engage with our content know that, you know, we're called the Company of Dads, but our goal is to help families fulfill their full potential. We talk about, you know, families, you know, more broadly, how dads fit into that, how moms fit into that, how kids fit into that, how extended families, you know, parents fit into it, and how we can sort of, you know, work differently. And this idea really came out of the pandemic when, you know, personally I saw my life going in a, you know, being pulled in all kinds of different directions, and there wasn't a resource that I could go to. So, you know, we created the Company of Dads. When you think about, you know, yourselves, either your own families or just as you observe your friends and your families, how do you see, you know, families operating differently today than when we were growing up? And I want to talk about, you know, high performing families, not deeply dysfunctional families, but I mean, how do you see those families, you know, performing differently today than perhaps when we were all kids? And I don't know, I'll keep the same order. I'll shoot this one out to Terry.
Well, I think, you know, in terms of my own story, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, um, you know, I think, you know, my family today, versus my family when I was growing up, you know, there's a lot that's the same. The values are the same, and I think that's the most important thing. But pretty much everything else is different. I was a stay-at-home dad for about 5 years. And now I kind of bring in the secondary income in the family. Um, and so in that sense, I kind of took on the role that my mother had when I was growing up. So there's that kind of reversal. But I think the most profound thing that's different about when I was growing up and now, and my daughters, my twin daughters are 11 years old. Um, the most profound difference is definitely the fact that, you know, my parents were the exact same kinds of parents that me and my wife are. They were, you know, I was very lucky with my parents. They were outstanding parents, and that's what me and my wife aspire to be. And the main difference is that my parents did not have the luxury of being around all the time. They had to be out of the house making money. So um, my wife and I both work from home, and it's enabled us to do much more hands-on parenting with our daughters. And I think you can kind of see it in my daughters, and how they are. That they've always had a parent in the home with them, which is not a luxury very many people had when I was growing up. It's even not a luxury that a lot of people don't have today, but it's a blessing that we have in my family.
That's great, Terry. Now, Emily, when you answer this, don't start off by saying, "What? You grew up in the 70s and 80s?" Because we know you're the youngest member of this team. But when you think about, you know, growing up and now, I mean, you're starting your own family. You got married, and your dad is so involved. How have, you know? Do you see any shift in how, you know, families operate today as opposed to, you know, when you were growing up 20 years ago?
So it's interesting because I was when Terry was talking about working from home being a thing now, um, I kind of started thinking because of the pandemic, I started working from home, right? And at some point I got laid off from the job that I was coming into the pandemic with, and I was like, they were going to force me back into the office at some point anyway. I do well working from home. Let's find something that's better. So at some point, I got my the next job, which was fully remote, no office whatsoever, no expectation of going back into an office, and everyone was based in all different parts, so it was not going to just happen. My parents also ended up getting remote jobs at some point, and then my sister got a hybrid. But it was interesting because now the whole family has remote. So I would once COVID kind of it ended, my dad and I will go out to like a co-working space nearby once in a while, just to kind of, get out of the house and see different places. And it's been nice because so my husband doesn't really work a job where he has an office. He's a home inspector, so he'll go to different places. Um, but when he's not at someone's house inspecting it, then he'll be at home doing his report or something else. So it's been really nice to just be like, oh, I can just walk up and just be like, hey, Dan, what's up? And just little interactions in the middle of the day, are just such a nice thing to just kind of a boss at my first job said something about how you spend more time with people at work than you do at the than you do at home, and he sounded really proud of it, and it felt wrong to me. I'm like, I didn't choose to be with you people in the same way I'd choose to be with my people. There's something not right about that. So just from observing people at work that where I work now, which is fully remote, it seems like everybody's so much more able to be involved with their kids and like we'll hear stories about what they were able to do or like, sorry, my partner's not feeling well, so I kind of have to take over today. I'll be out from this hour till this hour, but I'll be working later. And everyone's like, hey man, take your time, do what you have to. We're all human.
I just love that part of the story where you and your dad sometimes go to a co-working facility together. That's
Oh
really
yeah.
sweet.
Awesome.
It's really nice. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah,
No,
it's fun because we both work now, so we can do that. And we live
yeah,
close by. Like, actually, I moved and I ended up closer to my parents somehow, which isn't a bad thing. Very convenient because we talk to them a lot. So, it's just how it is.
that's great. Helder, one of the things besides your own sort of interaction with your own family, you've worked at colleges for decades now. When you think about like what you've observed, not you can talk about your own life, but you can also talk about what you've observed with interactions among families at the different colleges where you've worked. How have you seen things, evolve? This is so ironic that Helder, who is our ace podcast producer, has muted himself as he was about to answer the question. This is a moment that we want to make sure doesn't get edited out of the podcast.
That can go into the blooper section. It's kind of so what have I learned from observing families at colleges over the last decade?
Or answer it however you want. Yeah, or what you've just seen and, the good and the bad of it, how families have changed.
It's kind of, I mean, the bad of it is seeing, unfortunately seeing how some students inherit some of the worst qualities of their parents. But then there's also the flip side of that, which is finding students that have like really dedicated themselves to studying and to learning and to taking in everything that they can from growing from parents or being raised by parents or families. Some kids are raised by full families and foster parents and adopted parents, to see how they've grown and brought that humanity and empathy that they learned from their families to campuses and are trying to make the world a better place and learn everything to honor their families. One of the things I love to see at commencements especially is students that have like graduates that have decorated their mortarboards with messages to their parents, like some great ones like, thanks mom and dad, and we're here because of you, and thanking their ancestors and family members that have been there. And having been able to see some of those students grow over 4 years is really telling, and then seeing them with their parents at the end. And I've been there so long, sometimes I've seen them arrive with their parents and see that kind of joy when they come onto campus for the first time with their family and they get dropped off, and seeing the tears that some of their families are and themselves are doing, or some of the tears that they have when they're dropping their kids off and leaving, and then seeing them with the same joy at the end of 4 years has been kind of fun. I just saw that happen a few times the last two commencements, having seen students arrive.
That's fantastic. I have such a vivid memory of being dropped off at college, and you know, pretending that I knew what I was doing, and it was only sort of I don't know, a day or so afterwards. I'm like, where am I? Like, what am I doing here? Like, because by that point I had dirty laundry. I'm like, how do I do this? How do I figure this out? Like, how many coins do I need?
Well, I grew up with my parents always coming to we were so close that they would come every other weekend or so to visit, and my mother was always insistent because she worked in a laundry to want to help with the laundry. So that was embarrassing, but also helpful. So, and she'd always bring like freshly baked cakes that we would share with the dorm. So,
getting a package is, of course, the most exciting thing when you're away at school. And my roommate, he only lived about an hour away, and his parents would come often enough and get his laundry, and then they would mail it back to him. And the first time he opened the package in the mailroom, people were like, are those your clothes? And so after that, he learned not to open the package. And so he'd be carrying like a giant package back to our dorm and be like, wow, his parents send him stuff all the time. So, Skip, I mean, family has been so integral to your life, to who you are. I mean, I don't want to say more so than the rest of us, but as many people know, I mean, your family at one point was an accomplished band, called Cherry Homes, a bluegrass group, and then you of course went and formed your own group, Sideline. But family is, how have you seen it as you've grown up in a super tight knit family that literally traveled together, lived together, homeschooled together, to as you created your own family? What are some of the big things that stand out as similarities and differences?
So, going back, prior to when I was playing music with my family, we were very, very structured. We lived in Los Angeles. My dad was a carpenter, worked for the Los Angeles Unified School District. So he worked on schools all through the county. My mom was full-time mom, homeschooler, did any household, everything. So, it was your traditional mom handles the household, dad handles the heavy work, dad, one income home. My dad was very structured. He'd come home from work, and then he had this workout routine that he would go into his home gym in the garage and do. He's like a power lifter, so just really intense individual, when he was in his 40s. And so there was a whole lot of, when I was growing up, that there would be several days in the week the only time I would really see my dad was dinner time. And so, between work and then extracurricular activities that were always going on, that was kind of, dinner time was my time with my dad. And it wasn't until we started traveling around together that I actually saw him more, and I was most certainly more involved. He was more involved with my life. I was more involved with his life, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of looking at where I'm at here, it's like I was on the road. It's kind of the reverse. I was on the road seeing my kids less because I wasn't traveling with my kids. And it took me coming off the road to be at home more. And so it's kind of kind of the backwards effect. But like Terry was saying, the important thing is that the values were there. I feel that me being home, being with my wife, it's not too different of a situation. She has some stuff that she does, but it's most certainly secondary income. But she also, is, the point person when it comes to the schooling, and kind of, helping take care of the household while I'm doing what I do. But it doesn't have to be all on her either, because I can take breaks to help with a little laundry, or I can take the kids out. We try to take a couple days a week and split up, and she'll go out with one of the kids, and I'll keep the other at home. And that way, nobody has to strain too much on any point there. But also it's good for the kids to kind of break it up and change the routine a little bit. But then I don't have the commute at the end of the day either. As soon as I'm done with work, I'm there. I'm with my family. It's time to go jump into something else and or handle something else. Or I think like Emily was saying is if you've got something that you've got to handle, the beauty of the remote situation is that you can be like, hey, I'm going to work a little bit later, but I got to take a break in the middle of the day to handle this. Or I just want to, hey, I want to take a long lunch with my kids,
Like
just
I'm tired, or I have something to do. I just nope, not now. Be right
yeah,
back.
yeah. And then the way that I think that the culture has embraced the value of family because they actually are getting to experience it. I know there's a lot, and I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm just kind of the vibe that I get in the various outlets that I mess around with is that yeah, there's the workplace culture, but you wouldn't trade that for time with your kids if given the choice. I think you would trade it on selective days when things are a little bit crazy at home and you're like, man, I could really use a day out of the house. But if you want to look at the long-term investment and you get the little cats in the cradle playing in your head every once in a while when you're away, and now you're like, hey, you know what? It's not so bad. I'm actually pouring more of my time, more of my life into the investment that I am entrusted with is a lot more fruitful. And so I see, I'm just glad that there has been such an adaptation to accommodating parents who either hybrid or fully remote or whatever the case is, when it comes to how it affects kids and how it affects their interaction with kids. I think there's so much more potential for parents to have more in common with their kids and more connections than just, oh, I saw you at dinner. I might, it's just there's a lot more there to be enjoyed. And there definitely has been for me anyway.
I'm sitting here, sort of just our last question here, and then we'll kind of share any other thoughts. But this is our fourth holiday season with COVID, and I think back to 5 holiday seasons ago, 5 for us, and we celebrate Christmas. 5 Christmases ago, we were planning this trip, and we went on it to Hershey, Pennsylvania, to go to the Hotel Hershey, which is where the chocolate is made, and it was awesome because it's everything there has chocolate. Like you go to dinner, the chicken has chocolate on it, the steak has chocolate on it. I'm sure you could get chocolate on the mashed potatoes, but that seemed a little gross to me. And that was just such a different time where we just planned the trip and we didn't worry if somebody was obviously going to be sick, because people get sick around the holidays. And fast forward to where we are now, and the 5 people in my house, one of them has COVID right now. She's bouncing around doing fine, but now we're like, okay, can we see my elderly aunt? Can we see my elderly dad? And it's in some ways obviously there are many downsides to this, but we think differently about family around the holidays than perhaps we did 5 holiday seasons ago. Broad question, like how do you think the pandemic has changed things for our families? And then to end on a positive note, what is the best thing that's come out of that change? So Terry, why don't you take that first?
I think that in a certain way, it the COVID situation in 2020 and 2021, I think it made our kids, it contributed to them being more adaptable. That it's amazing how resilient kids are, but that COVID situation for a few years there, it really kind of forced them to learn to be adaptable. I think that on the negative side, it sort of, see, my kids were in elementary school at the time, and it sort of interrupted the natural process for all the kids in the elementary school where my kids went. It kind of interrupted the natural process of like developing friendships. And so now, like, all of that was sort of interrupted, and now it's being resumed at a later age than it normally happens. I think that was the main negative to it. But in terms of in general, it probably, we don't worry about COVID nearly as much as we did. We worried about it a lot in 2020 and most of 2021. But being at home together during the lockdown and all that, it brought us closer together as a family. We were already a pretty close family, but going through a weird situation, a hardship together, I think kind of brought us even closer together as a family unit.
Yeah. Thank you. And Emily, for you, how has the pandemic changed things for families, for your family, and also, the best thing that's come out of it?
So it was interesting because we were living in an apartment, and our roommate wanted to leave and go somewhere else, which totally fine. But then we had to find a roommate during the pandemic. That was not fun. Ended up working out, but like that was a little experience. That was just not that fun. Um, but yeah, so because I was out of the house, um, after everybody got their vaccinations, like we were still a little bit worried about things, but my grandmother kept insisting she'd really just rather see us than anything else. So at some point we're like, okay, I guess my family's our COVID pod now. So we would deliberately we have very deliberate plans to go and see them. So it wasn't uh, uh, and we're very friendly, so I'm pretty sure we would have seen each other anyway, but it just felt like it was more of a thing because it's like, all right, guys, guess we're risking it now. You know, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know, it's just interesting to see how that all ended up. And my sister lives in a completely different area, so we had to communicate with her a little bit differently because I think she was across time zones at that point. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
positives. I mean, we're all working from home now, and that's kind of what we wanted, so uh, I am happy about that. Um, Not really all that much changed in the end for us, though. We did good. We didn't have, no, don't have kids, aren't having kids. So, there's only so much that we had to worry about outside of ourselves. But I can tell, I mean, to Terry's point about social things being difficult for people. I know a kid whose prom got canceled. My sister couldn't go on her study abroad. Um, Even my friends were kind of upset because they couldn't, enjoy their early 20s and go out and meet people and stuff. So I mean, it's just, similar things, tough for everybody, no matter the age.
Yeah. Thank you. And Helder, same thing, the big changes, but then, end on the positives that have come out for you around, particularly around the holiday season.
The big changes were just, obviously we couldn't travel as much, and our family is kind of spread out around the world, so it was a little bit difficult to go see them. Um, so we started a little thing where my father would come over every weekend, and I mean, pretty much comes over every day, but like he would come over every weekend, and we would just kind of FaceTime with different family members to connect with them and updates and see what was going on. And then over just the course of, we had our special pods of family members that were around that we would be with for the holidays. We were able to do that. So, it sucked for a long time, but at the same time, we brought the families together a little bit differently. It did still, but then there has been a point where people have moved away, and my family's gotten a little bit smaller in the area. So we're still doing our best to like just maintain those connections in one way or another. Our families were always very close and family oriented. So even though they're spread out across two continents and 3 or 4 coasts now, we still try to do our best to get in touch as often as possible. There's a messenger group. I mean, that's the nice thing about all the different technologies and messages, is that there's different ways that we can all stay connected. There's one family group here, one family group there. So yeah, and then with the holidays, we still find ways to reach out and get together, even if we're, again, spread out so far as we are. But like my godson was born during pandemic, and I was recovering from COVID. Literally, the first day I tested positive was the weekend that was his baptism, when they came up from Texas to be able to have the baptism here. So that was fun to be able to be part of that, even if I was like coughing and wheezing still a little bit and fatigued. But and then now last year we got to go travel with them to Portugal for the first time, and he and I got to go see a soccer game together. And as a 1-year-old, getting to like experience soccer with him for the first time. And yeah, so now he's here as a 2-year-old, and we're gonna have Christmas again, so it'll be fun.
That's awesome. And Skip, the pre and post pandemic Skip is a totally different guy. But talk about it in terms of families, and again the most positive thing that come out of it as you think about the holiday season. You're on mute. You're on mute, Skip.
I'm competing with Helder on more than just the sweater. I'm trying to follow suit here. So when it came to the pandemic as a whole, obviously my viewpoint specifically personally, is that the positives have outweighed the negatives massively. Just in terms of how it has affected my life path. Obviously there's a lot of tragedy that surrounded it. I'm not making light of that in the least. But I think it gave us a lot of perspective too. In I think it was late June, maybe early July of 2020, Stephanie's grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, and he had been ill for a little while, about a month or so of kind of a weird illness, but the whole doctor situation was weird in itself. So it was hard to kind of pinpoint what was going on. And we finally realized it was cancer. And at that point, it kind of, for the family here, it kind of threw into realization or effect. It's like, pandemic or not, Stephanie's, 76 at the time, 75, 76-year-old grandmother, or sorry, 80, anyway, older grandmother is not physically or emotionally able to just kind of push through this on her own. We need to be there for her. We need to be there for each other. We need to help. So if we, obviously taking precautions, if you are feeling ill, we don't need to take somebody who's already riddled with cancer and expose them to something that is going to make the problem even bigger. But we also need to pull together. We need to support, run, grab groceries. And you kind of, we took the whole concept of what was going on and said, okay, I understand, take precautions, but we have to look after each other. And that, when he passed away, which was about a year and a half later, so early 2022, we have looked back several times and thought, I'm so thankful that we have been able to all be there for each other through all of this, because I can't imagine how hard those, especially last several months, would have been on Gigi if we hadn't been around, and or just with everything that's gone on with that. And I had a friend who, she had gotten COVID, and so she did a 14-day quarantine, and this was I think December of 2020 or maybe January of 21. And on the last day of her quarantine, her husband went out to the grocery store and got in a car accident and died. And so she, even taking that into perspective, and she took the last 14 days not spending any time with him. And then that was it, and it's sad. But again, if you want to, I'm always looking for the positive message or the silver lining, and it's an eye opener. It's an eye opener that, whether it be a virus or whether it be, anything else. Your time is short, and that's one of the reasons why spending time with my family has been so amazing for me, is because I don't know. I could be the guy going out to the grocery store and not come back. Uh, you know, that's soaking up every second with my kids has been a joy from that perspective. But it's also, I think it's heavier when you've all, like you were saying, when you've all been through something that big. It really shows you what you mean to each other. And so I find that a positive. Obviously there's all the other stuff. There's work from home, and there's all of this getting, we had Adeline in the summer of 21. So, I think she'd be considered a COVID baby. But she, being able to pretty much being pushed into a position of being there through my wife's pregnancy, helping take care of Aiden, so that she could deal with some of the things, because she had a really rough pregnancy with Adeline. So I was thankful that I was actually home and I was able to be there. And that was part of the eye-opening thing for me that said, hey, I want to be home more. I want to do this more. So again, all tragedy aside, I see many positives in the way that it's affected people's perspective of life, respect for each other, and just an overall value for your direct family.
Thanks, Skip. And thanks to all of you. I want to close out by just thanking, every one of you, because you make this possible. So thank you, Helder. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Terry. And thank you, Skip. And I also want to thank my wife, Laura, who's been unfailingly supportive since I left this column writing gig at this place called the New York Times 2 years ago and launched the Company of Dads. So without her, literally, I would not be doing this. So I'm deeply grateful, and deeply grateful to all of our listeners. And so whatever holidays you celebrate, please have a happy holiday, and let's have a safe and happy 2024. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Company of Dads podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in week after week. Just want to use this moment here to thank the people who make it possible. Number one, of course, Helder Mira, who is our podcast editor. We also have Skip Cherryholmes, who many of you know from the Lead Dad Diaries. He's taken over our social media. Terry Brennan is helping us with our audience development, and Emily Servin is there each and every day helping with the web development. I can't do any of this without an amazing board of advisors. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who help, and I want to say thank you to everyone who listens, and hopefully you'll tune in again next week. Thanks so much.